Let's get right to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Steve Smith. Steve Smith is the president of Fresh Games, which is located right here in Columbus, Ohio, downtown. Fresh Games is a casual game development company. They do games for mobile. They used to do a lot more with desktop. They've been in business for over a decade, which is an awesome accomplishment. He's kind of our hometown hero, and he's a really smart guy. So please, if you will, help me welcome Steve Smith.
Okay. So, my name again is Steve Smith. I'm president and founder of Fresh Games. We've been in Columbus making games since 2002. We probably are the only company you've probably never heard of. Back in the days of making games, we were doing PC and Flash, and there didn't seem to be that much excitement around Columbus. So, it just happened to be a business that I happened to enjoy, and we moved into it. But in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years, there's just been such a surge of excitement with gaming from social games to mobile that there is an excitement of game development. And I think Columbus has a lot of potential, and I'm hoping that this event will help nurture a lot of new relationships and we can start building something great in Columbus. So we have been, like I said, in Columbus self-funded, doing mostly PC and Flash games. We pivoted to mobile in 2011, which is the biggest market growing, and will always, keep growing. Currently, we have 8 employees. We have a development studio in Poland, which handles a lot of our development. They have three people over there. But the basis of Fresh Games has always been developing ideas, doing the marketing and publishing, and then we find outside developers to make all of our games. Hopefully, we can start having more people in Columbus make games for us, which would be exciting. This last year, I had met Steve a couple years ago, and I called him up, and we decided to do a game together, and it actually did extremely well. It was called Escape the Titanic, so at least that was a start for us. Some of the games we've done, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, Cubis, Ranch Rush, Cake Pop Party, which was a kid's title that we kind of explored free-to-play monetization. Escape the Titanic, you picked 2, Ranch Rush, so just to name a few. Oh, sorry. There we go. So I wanted to come up with something interesting for this title, for this discussion this morning. And I thought this was kind of apropos for some reason. We've been doing mobile games for a while, but I think anybody that hasn't or has maybe could be able to relate to this. If you're making iOS games, the big thing you have to be concerned with is you have one channel. You have one time to get something right. And there are a lot of simple and complex challenges to making games. If you get it wrong, that's what will happen. But we decided to change the name to something probably a little bit more apropos for this morning. So I thought Insider Strategies for Creating Successful Games might be a better way of putting it. Today I'm going to talk about a lot of things, and I just want to let you know that this will be posted later, so if you have any questions, you can download it. So, why do we like making mobile games? Very good questions. Mobile games is the #1 platform in the world. The democratization of releasing a game as an indie developer, any developer, globally is unparalleled these days. Anyone with a $99 developer kit from iOS can license and be a star selling games around the world. Selling games is selling a game 24/7 globally and getting paid in 45 days is an amazing situation. Never before has that been possible, but it is now. So, looking at some stats here. Never before have you had such massive reach. As an example, World of Warcraft took 11 years to scale to 10 million users. Draw Something, which was a mobile game from last year, within 6 weeks scaled to 50 million users, which is amazing. So a little backstory. OMG Pop was the developer of that title. They were based in New York, had 60 people full-time, and they were on the verge of actually going out of business. They released this title, and within 1 week, they hit 1 million users. Within the second week, they hit 5 million users. Within the third, they had 10 million users, which is just crazy. Zynga took notice of them, was interested in them, and then within 7 weeks, they ended up purchasing them for $120 million. So within 1 month, you go from rags to riches. Interesting story. So the growth and reach of mobile versus internet users. So mobile games market is to double by 2016 to $24 billion. Some interesting stats: 3 billion internet users, 6 billion mobile phone users, and 7.2 billion global users. Pretty much 83% of the world right now has a mobile phone. We're the most connected generation. We're on 24/7. Other stats that I find interesting: 48% female, 52% male. Back in the old days, whenever I said I was making games, people thought it was for kids. Well, it's totally changed. An interesting stat as far as mobile games: 55% don't spend money on games. 40% are between the age of 33 and 50. Another interesting stat: year over year, highest growth is people 50 plus, 148%. App Store stats. By download, 38% of all downloads are games. By revenue, 73% of all games make up 73% of the revenues. By revenue on Google, it's 88%. Another interesting stat is the top 100 grossing games, 94% on iOS are free, and on Google Play it's 98% free. People always ask, how do you make money? We'll get into that. The other thing that is very important to know, even from a couple years back, is the mobile market is extremely competitive. Extremely. Over 1.3 million apps, 38% of those are games. 261,000 publishers are fighting for awareness. Daily, you have 180 games and 710 apps being uploaded for review by Apple. Another interesting fact: 88% don't break even because they're doing something wrong. Another interesting fact is 60% of the apps in the App Store are zombie apps. Not games, but actually have no updates and less than 10 reviews. The other interesting fact is the market is extremely lucrative if you know how to make a hit. Candy Crush currently is doing $890,000 daily. Sorry about that. On iOS. That's some impressive numbers. Puzzles and Dragons, a company out of Japan that has 90% of their revenues from the Japan iOS store and 10% in the U.S. is doing $2 million daily. A little peek, I'm not sure if you can see those numbers, but that's some of the top grossing games, what they're making currently. And it drops off quite a bit after the first, second, third, it drops quite dramatically. So what's it take to get to the top? Top grossing. Games are making 77. I'm sorry, this mic seems to be. I'm not. So the top grossing games are number 10 are making $77,000 a day. Top 50, $15,000, and top 10, $10K. What does it take to get for installs to get to those positions? So top 10, 75,000 downloads a day. To get to number 1, it's like 120,000 downloads. Top 50, 23,000. Top 10, 15,000. Top paid, which is quite dramatically different, to get to top 10 is 11,000. 50, 2,000, and top 100, 1,100. One thing to note, most of the top apps in the App Store are paying to stay on the top. You have to pay to play, which we'll talk about later. Candy Crush, number 1 game, still spends $2 to $4 million a month to be relevant due to the churn. So now I've got you a little bit excited. Here's the reality. If you're making mobile games and have little or no experience, you will be making mistakes. No doubt about it. Everybody in this that makes mobile games makes mistakes. How do you avoid them? Well, today I thought I would do something kind of interesting. And after evaluating hundreds of top grossing games and deconstructing why they're successful, I'm sharing my insights for you for what you need to do to create hit games. The next slide to me is the Holy Grail. The success formula for making mobile games are these 3 pillars. Of course, you got to have great gameplay. But on top of that, you've got to have compulsion loops. And from there, which that equals retention. Keep people coming back to your game day after day after day. If you don't, most people think I make a game and people will play it. That's not true anymore. It's so demanding out there what people are expecting that you've got to have something amazing. Second, monetization. How are you going to make money from your game? Basically, as I said before, free to play. 96% of the top 100 games are free to play. And then third, you've got to have social hooks, which are basically how you share with friends. Getting the game out there and making it viral. So where do we start? Starting from the beginning with making a game. The game idea. Some things may seem obvious, but a lot of people get things wrong. So let's discuss some of the things right from the top. Be unique with whatever game you decide to make. I know that sounds obvious, but some people go out there and copy games, which will absolutely get you nowhere. It's one thing to be inspired by games and innovate, but copying won't cut it anymore. The other thing you need to know is you don't need to reinvent the wheel. As I always say, make it rounder. Look at what other games are doing out there. There's a lot of ideas to be taken from. People could always make things a little bit better. Surprise and delight, always. That's the key thing. People have high expectations, and you've got to create little nuances in your game to surprise people. One thing with Candy Crush, as I said, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. I don't know how many people have played Candy Crush, but it's a match-3 game. Match-3 games have been done so many times, it's insane. But they basically took the idea of adding free-to-play, compulsion loops, and social elements better than anybody. And those 3 keys, which I just mentioned, are really what really make that game successful. Next thing you need is a killer theme. Demographic determines design direction. Depending on who your target audience is, if it's kids, or if it's core gamers, or if it's casual. Casual, we always try to stay middle of the road, not too female, not too male, just something that's pleasing. Temple Run's a great example of that. Great theme and awesome artwork attract users to download your games. So artwork must be awesome. Marketing apps is superficial, yes. It's all about the looks, at first at least. The other thing, as I said, play top grossing games to see what ideas are working. It's great for inspiration out there. Next, monetization. How are you making money from your games? That's a really interesting thing. Years ago, paid games were all the rage. Right now, it's very hard. Doing a paid game at 99 cents is very hard to market unless it's a brand, as some of these, as far as this chart shows you, which is the top paid games. Unless it's featured or it's a non-game app, that's probably what's going to happen. The other selections that you have are free with ads, only ads, which is easy to do, but it's very hard to make money unless you're driving millions and millions of users or doing direct deals with advertisers. The other option is freemium, which is a great way to start. Make a light version with a little paywall for completion of it or completion of levels. That is the best way I would recommend for any indie developer without trying to be too complicated with doing free-to-play. Although, free-to-play is the optimal way to make money. It's open-ended monetization, which means you can always, the gameplay is open, you're always going to make money for the long term. Consumables and power-ups are really where you make a lot of money. The other important thing to understand is free-to-play is an art form, and very few have mastered it. Even the big companies have a hard time mastering that. So it takes a lot of time to really understand how that works. I would highly advise playing a lot of games to see how they do it out there. So next thing, game design. We don't always follow this, but it's obvious. But you can. It's something extremely important. Establish a clear, well-defined path from the beginning when you're making a game. It's hard to go back, especially on mobile games after you release the game. Next, name. Very, very important. And I think that sometimes that's the hardest thing that we have to do. We come up with hundreds of names, and trying to figure out what really works is very difficult. One of our developers in-house kind of coined this thing that really kind of makes it easy. What it is, what it does. So if you look at games like Candy Crush, what it is, what it does. Fruit Ninja, what it is, what it does. Makes it very easy to kind of figure out how to come up with a name. The next thing I highly advise is searching the net once you come up with a name to see what the availability is. There might be other games out there. Next, if that's open, go to the USPTO trademark office, do a search to see if it's available. If you still got a name that looks good, I would run ads on Facebook to do A/B testing to see what kind of click-through you get from people, which a lot of people do. Just running small ads, spending $50 or $100 to see what people click on will tell you immediately, is that name relevant or not. And then from there, I would register it with the Apple Store, because there are times when people come up with names after you think you have a name and they've already registered it. So if you have something clean, register it immediately. The other thing to really understand about mobile games is it's all about bite-sized entertainment. If it's users must have meaningful fun, must have a meaningful experience within the first 1 to 3 minutes. If you can't entertain them within that time frame, you're probably going to lose them immediately. Great games that feature that are CSR racing, which is basically short-term drag racing. You're within 1 or 2 minutes, you basically picked a car, raced, come back, do the same thing over again. Candy Crush, again, same kind of game. Great compulsion loops in there. You come back, play the game. It's very simple, very fun. Deer Hunter, another genre, but again, short-term hunting, killing, coming back. As mentioned before, another thing that is extremely critical is social. Understand the Facebook Open Graph API. There's all kinds of information up on the Facebook developer page. Understand that. Understand how to use it. Strong virality of games reduces paid user acquisition. And when I say paid user acquisition, that's how to, advertising your games out there, which gets very expensive. It's the cheapest way to get users. So gifting, sharing, posting in between friends is a great way to get virality of your game. One thing to know, grinders, which is a term that developers use, which are people that never pay, but they will ask their friends for help, and that's all part of this social element. So 80 to 90% of people do not pay for games, but they will. But the key thing is to use them for you to make money for yourself. So for their sharing to their other friends and their friends coming into your games, it's a great way. Another interesting thing to look at the relevancy of social games, Angry Birds never really incorporated significant social hooks into their games. And most of their titles currently are not even in the top 75 or 100. User experience, that is all the little nuances. User interface and user experience. It has to be simple. One of my favorite games at the moment is a game called Quiz Up. They have some of the best UI design I've seen anywhere. So the onboarding to the game is intuitive with very little instructions. You come into this game, it's flowed, it's easy, the sounds are all great. They do all kinds of little tricks to make the user want to play the game. They draw you in there and make it exciting. And that's another extremely critical part. Any successful game that you see anymore has great user interface design. It takes a lot of time to get that. Polishing is very important. The other big secret sauce of mobile games is compulsion loops. Basically, what it keeps to have a user coming back day after day. A little explanation on core loops. It's basically the psychology of addictive gameplay. Phase 1, as an example with Candy Crush, is the game is a very simple match-3 game. It's challenging but not frustrating. It's very easy to get into, very easy to understand. the difficulty curve slowly ramps up. Very slow. Within the first 20 levels, it's very, very easy. Slowly, so basically you get 5 hearts or 5 energy as you play the game, but you slowly deplete those as you lose the levels. But slowly, the player feels good, they're not losing a lot. Phase 2, if you've lost all your lives, you've got to wait a half an hour for the energy to recharge, which the user usually gets tired of waiting. And secondarily, the game gets progressively harder. And when that means you might need power-ups to progress further. But it's a slow-paced gameplay that makes people excited, invested in the game. Once they've got to 20 or 30 levels, they're into the game, they've got scoring, and there's social elements built into it. A little graphical example of a core loop is how a person plays. They use their energy or hearts. They're depleted. They wait. They request from their friends to get energy. Or they earn them by waiting for half an hour, and then they go back and play. Or they basically sidestep all that and just purchase. But the core loop is extremely important as far as game design. The other very, very, very big thing about game design, especially in mobile games, is optimizing with analytics. Years ago, we never did that. It wasn't even heard of. Now, it's absolutely critical that you optimize with analytics. So the days of shipping in and waving goodbye are over. Top games are all data-driven. It's all about the data. So what you have to do in mobile games is really understand the user funnels. So a user funnel is just really from point A to point B, how the user, you acquire them, and how they monetize. So basically a little funnel design on the side. Acquisition, what are we doing for retention and monetization? Know the key conversions. There's a company called Flurry, if anybody's not familiar with them, which you can do free analytics with them, but you can understand everything that's going on in the game. Simple things, when making a game, are to understand the average revenue per user, which basically is taking the amount of users divided by the revenue you're earning, and then you get a number. If you are not earning at least 5 cents per user, you have a problem, which means you have to go back to the drawing board. Retention needs to be at least 35%. If not, something's wrong. And the conversion from downloads to paid is somewhere between 2 and 5%. So if those numbers are not looking good, you have something wrong with your game, and you need to go back and figure out what you need to do to change it. One game that we worked with Steve, as a little example, was Escape the Titanic. We released it as free-to-play. It was open-ended. We had no blockers in there in any way. People could play from beginning to end. It was basically a puzzle game, a room puzzle game that you basically had to solve puzzles from beginning to end. There was 43 puzzles. We made it hard enough to where we knew most people would not get through it. But apparently after looking at the analytics, our average revenue per user was lower than we expected. The retention was extremely high. It was 80%, which is crazy high. But we wanted to go back and figure out what we need to do to earn more money from each user, but we knew the retention was high. So basically what we did is we knew at halfway through the game, 80% of the users were still playing the game. So we put a paywall in the game where people had to buy a ticket to buy hints or get all the answers to all the solutions to the puzzles to progress any further. And we weren't sure if we were going to lose a lot of people, but we knew the retention was very high. So after incorporating that into the game, our revenues tripled, which was amazing. So without knowing all that data, we would have never known in the beginning what to do, or in the end if it was actually working. So it's extremely important. Game marketing. Another interesting fact that some people might find shocking is icon design. Very important in the App Store. It's your first impression of what people think of your game. We spend an insane amount of time making icons. We could make up to over 100 at times, as you can see right there. The color, the design, totally changes the design, the edges, every little nuance makes a difference, and it takes a lot of time. And the other important thing is you might be having your art department work on it, or you might be designing it. It looks great on the screen. But we always make a screenshot, put it on our phone, and look at it actually on the device, because it does make a difference. So that is another important thing. App Store, your little store for your games. User flow, when people download a game or go into the App Store, it's basically the user flow is following. They look at the icon, they look at the ratings, they scroll all the way down to the screenshots, look at the reviews, and then they read your copy. So it's important to understand how people look at stuff. Great copy also grabs attention. We spend a lot of time crafting every little word that goes into the body of copy. The key thing, there's 2 sentences above the fold, which is the first thing somebody will see when they look at your game. Very important, attention-grabbing copy that really kind of encapsulates what your game's all about. Screen caps, again, very, very important. We spend a lot of time capturing amazing shots, doctoring some of them a little bit, but also, putting great copy. So important things, always show gameplay screen first, awesome screenshots, and copy layered on top of the screens, as it says in the bottom call out. Another important thing, App Store optimization, or ASO as it's called, can increase your sales 1 to 3% without doing anything. All you need to do is, when you're doing any Android game or iOS, there's key search words. It's 100 for iOS, coming up with the best ones where people would search for your games. There's a great site that we use all the time called Sensor Tower, which basically will let you type in any game out there and see pretty much 95% of what the exact keywords are for that title. From there, you can look at titles that might be similar to yours and what keywords make sense, and then kind of make your own keyword list up. This site is great also for analyzing click-throughs on the search words, which allow you to go back each time you want to make an update and revise your keywords. One important thing on iOS, you can only change search words every time you do an update. Another critical thing that we do also is a soft release. Test before you release your games. We do beta testing in-house, but you never know what's going to happen until you truly do a broad release. So the countries that everybody uses are Australia, New Zealand, Canada, since they speak English. The smaller countries, Australia and New Zealand, are great to do a little test. If you really want to turn the throttle up a little bit, go to Canada, do a 1 to 2 month test, see what's working, what's not, use your analytics, tweak things out, then go and do a broad release. You don't have to do any user acquisition of ads, but if you want to, $500 to $1,000 is not unheard of as far as spending money in those countries just to get some users into your game. Another very interesting thing is going viral. How do you do that? You never know. But people talking about your game is the cheapest way to get downloads. What we do is try to create little shareable moments inside of our games that people will share with their friends, talk about, post if it happens to be that way. But in Candy Crush, they've got a 1 to 3 minute cascade, which people always get excited about showing their friends. There's a game called 4 Picks 1 Word. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that game, but everybody was posting, needing hints on Facebook. So a lot of variety right there. In one of the games we released called You Pick 2, we did something kind of a little funny, which it was all in good taste, but it's a picture game. It's a pop culture word game. And we decided to do something a little edgy on one of the pieces of artwork. But we noticed when people saw it, they kind of chuckled and thought it was funny. So a great little shareable moment. Another option you can do, which is the creme de la creme, if you can get this done, is getting featured by Apple or Google. Make contact with those guys, build relationships. It's very, very important. You can go to any of the game shows, Casual Connect, GDC, find out from friends or people where they're at. They don't make themselves that well known because they'd be bombarded, but finding those people is extremely important. If you can make contact with them, you need to create a short, compelling pitch kit. 1 to 2 minute video showcasing the best of your gameplay. Sell sheets and screen caps and descriptions are also important. If you can feature any of their tech, that also goes very far. If you have the opportunity to get featured by any, Google, Amazon, or iOS, on Apple, you will see a minimal lift of 1,000% of where you're currently at, which is crazy. They featured one of our games, Cubis, 4 weeks ago, and I calculated basically the viral lift that we got from them was about worth $100,000. So it definitely pays to build that kind of relationship. Public relations, very important. I think it's got its key place, but I don't put too much weight into it. I mean, games usually, when they're good and hot, they get very viral very quick. But the best thing to do is reach out to the top 6 sites in mobile, which I've listed there. If those guys cover you, everybody else will cover you. So it makes sense to spend that time focusing on them because it is very time consuming. So with those guys, I would do a press pitch kit, which is basically create 1-page talking points. They want things super simple. They want you to basically make their job as easy as possible. They're not going to play your game. They want little screenshots. They want little talking points of why it's great, and they want to see a video of your game. If you can get them excited from there, they'll write something about it. As I said, you don't see great, sales lift from PR, but it's good for you to use and copy in iTunes. The other thing I would highly advise is YouTube. There's a lot of video reviewers out there that have high views. Pitch your games to them. They can review it. You'll get a lot of people looking at your game. And also, obvious, but also create a Facebook fan page. User acquisition. People ask, how do your games get noticed? Well, I'm sure anybody that has mobile games sees ads. That is pretty much the key to getting noticed out there. There's either banner ads, video ads, interstitial ads, or takeovers. Those are pretty much the primary ways of getting your game noticed. The biggest things to understand are really the metrics on what it's going to cost you, and they're broken down into 3 categories: cost per click, which you can pay anywhere from 1 cent to 4 cents on a banner or video; CPI, which is basically what everything's going to these days, which is extremely expensive, which is cost per install, which basically is just to have a download from an ad could cost you up to $2.50, which is insane. They're working with, and some people have it, but it's not totally fine-tuned, is cost per acquisition or cost per action, which basically you set an action inside of your game for people to trigger, and as soon as they do that, then you pay whatever the number is per network. There's also promotional networks for doing burst campaigns, which you can get 10 to 15,000 downloads per day. And the best thing is doing cross-promotion, which equals free. If you've got traffic in your game, you can work with a network called Chartboost, which allows you to reach out to people to swap traffic. 5,000, 10,000 clicks, you get 5,000 or 10,000 in their game. It costs you nothing, which is great. So the big thing with mobile, if you haven't been involved with it or you see it, is be ready to adapt. Mobile moves extremely fast. It's always changing. You need to be ahead of the curve. Always keep reading blogs, any of the gaming sites, talking to people, networking, know what's current because things change extremely fast. Second of all, stay current with monetization tactics. They are always changing too. How you make money in games is extremely important. And what I always say is the smart ones who take intelligent risk are the ones who succeed. Doing things a little bit differently than everybody else, it might be a little bit risky, but it might pay off too. So it's worth it doing that. With this presentation, I basically put together something for everybody if they want to use it. Is the best third-party services out there for mobile. For monetization, you've got a company called Keep, which basically is a rewards network that gifts to users. When you trigger an achievement in your game, the user gets some sort of reward from an advertiser. You get paid also for each one that you give out, so it's a win-win for everybody. Chartboost, as I said, is a great ad network, but they also have this click trades, or basically cross-promotion network, which is great. Playhaven, which is a complete turnkey network that for monetization, ads, everything you'd ever need. Same with Tapjoy. App-A-Day is a free app network, which is great for doing boost campaigns. App Annie Think Gaming, all app data related information if you want to look at the charts, see who's doing what. Great sites. Video ad networks, Ad Colony, Fungal, great. iAds, AdMob, Millennium Media are all banner ad networks, which are great starting points. Flurry is a company that you will need to definitely have incorporated into your game for analytics. A neat little thing that we found and we use is called Pixel Resort, which basically allows you to create app icons and then resize them, and it shows you how it looks on the iPhone, which is great. It saves an amazing amount of time. Again, that search site, Searchman is another site for doing app store optimization for key search words. And then Reflector is a cute little utility that basically allows you for $15 to create videos of your game wirelessly on your computer and then have somebody edit those and make videos of your games, which is great. Additionally, I've added some of the best blogs for anybody that wants to go do a lot more research into a lot of these topics. These are great sites. And in summary for success, as I said, addictive compulsion loops, critical, key, important thing for successful mobile games. Free-to-play, monetization, every game's pretty much doing that. You need to understand how that works if you want to make a lot of money in this business. Got to have compelling social hooks. Got to have it. Without that, your game is probably going to just be lackluster. Look at the top games. Everyone's got some sort of social hook built into the game. And finally, polish. To make great games, it takes a lot of time and a lot of polish. We spend an insane amount of time making our games look, play, and feel great, and it pays off. And that's it. And I don't know if anybody had any questions. There's a lot of information on there. Yes.
Are you going to put this slideshow up anywhere?
Yeah. It's going to be on the How Game Developer site probably in a couple days. It's going to be on their site.
Yeah, we'll have it up on our site. As well, we have a roving mic, too, so just raise your hand if you're interested in giving a question.
Yeah.
The Flurry?
Sure.
There goes my opinion. The analytics?
Yes.
What type of key analytics are you looking at? I saw that you had like the average
ARPU, I mean, actually, my opinion is Flurry is free, but it's not the best site. And the really good ones that really break down everything in a nice, easy to understand interface cost a lot of money. And basically, you have to backtrack out some of the numbers. But the key analytics are, as I said, retention, average revenue per user, and the click-throughs, the percentages of people that buy your games. And those are the most key critical elements. But I mean, you can set up event tracking also in your games to look at how people flow through them, where they're getting stuck. On level 3, we see 90% of the people leave the game. Well, without having that stuff, without that kind of analytics, you would never know that. So at least you can see everything that's going on the flow. But you have to set up those kind of funnels and event tracking. Okay. Yes.
Would you recommend that if we were making a game, would you recommend for the first 10 levels when we're trying to hook the gamer for that to be the light version?
How many levels are you planning on having?
Let's see here. I got it way out here. One second. Schedule it up.
That question, I mean, it depends on how many levels you've got and how you, at the end of the day, the levels have to be amazing and engaging. People, we've experienced with our own games, if the game isn't amazing, people will not pay for anything. So my biggest advice to you is really, before worrying about monetization and light levels and light versions, make the gameplay as amazing as possible, and then from there figure it out. But I mean, giving away free, again, if you have 100 levels, I would say probably the rule of thumb, maybe 20%, 25%. Yes.
I realized that most of your stats there were for mobile platforms.
Sure.
Do any of these strategies work for consoles? For instance, Sony gave away a bunch of PlayStation Mobile dev licenses earlier this summer. Do any of these tools work in that environment as well?
Well, from the gameplay perspective, again, I'm not totally that familiar with what they're doing, but I mean, I'm assuming in that network you're pretty much paying one price for the game, correct? Is there light versions or demo versions?
Sony doesn't allow free downloads in their particular store. I know Nintendo sometimes has free things in their store. As far as I'm aware, you can actually have in-app purchases in the Sony store as well.
Sure.
But there are no free downloads unless they feature it because they won't allow it.
Again, game design, creating compulsion loops, why people need to buy anything in your game really depends on the game design. So you can use some of the strategies that I outlined. Again, it's just going to depend on the game and the environment and the platform for each game. So it's always going to be a little bit different. The one thing to note, even in mobile games, is there's no cut and paste solution for everything. What monetization might work in one game might not exactly work in another game. And a lot of people try to do exactly the same thing, and it doesn't work. So it's a lot of massaging. You have to really go back and look at the analytics, where people are falling off, what's happening inside the game. So it's more of a science anymore. And the guesswork is out if you have the right analytics set up, which is good. But it does take a lot of time to go back and look at that. Hopefully that answers your question. Yes?
I was just wondering, from your opinion, I know that you're completely and totally in the mobile space, but is there any purpose or real place for games out there that aren't trying to be in the top 1 to 3, making hundreds of thousands of dollars every day, but the entire ability to create a game for mobile and be recognized as a good 50,000 users actually download it, and getting into that position in mobile space? So is that even a thing to shoot for?
Sure. I mean, I preface this for people that really want to be making money. I mean, it's to make games and have people enjoy what you're doing is fantastic. And I mean, and you always have to start out small. I mean, mobile is a very tricky platform, and I would advise starting out with a very simple game and then release it and see what happens, and see what kind of traction you have. So yeah, I mean, it depends on what your personal goals are. I mean, we happen to have a company and I have to support people, so we have to make money. But if I didn't, I'd probably be doing a lot of experimental games just to see how they work. Yes? Oh.
Talk a bit about user research. Like creating games for different demographics that are really compelling.
So you asked me if I do a lot of research, or can you? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me.
Just maybe talking about understanding different user groups, different demographics, and how to make a compelling game for women versus senior citizens, or
years ago there were a lot of companies that they're developers that made games specifically for women, and I think they fell flat on their face, everyone that I knew of, because they were trying to cater to women and trying to be too blatant about it. And I think casual games work for women. And I mean, when I say we do casual games, I mean you're riding the fine line of not being too feminine, not too masculine, and you kind of go down the middle of the road. So It's hard to say on a lot of things. I mean, Candy Crush, which I'm assuming that most people have looked at or played in here, never would have thought would have been as successful. I mean, it looks very childish, in my opinion, with the candies and all the little animations that they have in the game. But somehow it struck a nerve. So that's the other thing. When we do soft releases, you never know what's going to really take off in this market. And I think sometimes when you try to overanalyze things, you end up killing something. So things that we think are going to work don't, and things that we think do, you never know. So it's again, that's why I went back to do test releases or soft releases. You really see what happens. Some companies spend a lot of money, do these soft releases in Canada, and kill their game. If it doesn't perform well, I mean, miserable, they'll just kill it. Kill it. So. Yes.
Do you think there's more money to be made actually writing the tool sets and the test harnesses for the games you're testing themselves?
Do I think there's more money? I define more money.
Analytical system, like you were saying, have an analytical system for determining
there's a lot of people. There's probably 6 or 7 top analytics companies out there. And almost everybody's using, they're all using one of them. So, I mean, and it's very costly, very expensive to do. It's all server-based. I mean, you're just crunching data all the time. So, and all of them are somehow VC funded. So, I wouldn't advise that personally. But, I mean, you can make money. I mean, as an example, when Flurry's free, but some of these other companies charge you 1 cent per event that it's tracking. And we might have tens of millions of events, collaboratively being tracked, which is insane amount of money. That's why we don't use those companies. But, it runs the gamut. So, if somebody can create a better user interface for analyzing analytics, I would do that. But again, it's still going to cost a lot of money to do a startup of that sort. And any other tools out there, most of them are free. So. No, because it takes just as much time. We've done those things and we always get burnt. So it takes a lot of time and money and expertise, and it's easier just to get some of the free. Flurry's great. It takes you a little bit more time, but it's definitely not worth doing it in-house. Sure.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Let's get a hand up for
Thank you.
Steve Smith.